On today's Gangster Profile, William the Wild Guy Grasso, the vicious boss of New Haven, Connecticut. William Grasso, aka Wild Guy, was a vicious old-school gangster from the rough city of New Haven, Connecticut. Originally, he was an associate of the Colombo crime family. The Colombos, along with the other 5 families in New York, had a lot of interest in Connecticut and Western Mass before Raymond Patriarca solidified his power base. The capo that Grasso reported to is Ralph Whitey Tropiano, who was a killer in his own right. Tropiano is rumored to be involved with the killing of Willie Moretti, the Genovese boss in New Jersey, a high-profile mob murder. Grasso's main hustles were street loans and he ran underground dice games, but he had bigger aspirations than this. He had a grand scheme to take over the garbage industry in New Haven and muscle in on the labor unions. The government was able to prove this and prosecuted him. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison, and what seemed like bad luck initially turned out to be the most fortuitous moment of his life, because his cellmate happened to be none other than the Don of the New England Mafia, Raymond Patriarca. Through their time together in prison, they formed a lifelong bond, and this is always resented by Grasso's contemporaries in the New England Mafia. After wrapping up his sentence, he switched allegiances from the Colombo family to Patriarca's New England Borgata. One of Grasso's first missions by Raymond was to start reinforcing the boundaries of the South and West with New York. From the end of the 60s through the late 70s, each major New York figure that operated in New England seemed to disappear. Even Grasso's one-time mentor, Ralph Whitey Tropiano. Although I read that Grasso's nephew said Whitey was killed by his own Colombo family for talking to the feds. By the end of the 70s, the office controlled everything east of the Connecticut River. Even in the rough central Connecticut city of Hartford, which traditionally was wide open, was now closed for business. Grasso rolled up on Genovese capo Tony Volpe and told him to kick rocks, and he complied. Even the 5 families in New York knew that the office was too powerful at this time on their own turf to be pressed. New negotiations would have to be made. Wild Guy Grasso lined up all bookmakers from Connecticut to Rhode Island and told them to kick it up. Grasso is said to control all underground gambling in the state of Connecticut, grossing the office close to $1 million a week. Even with this type of cash flowing, Grasso dressed extremely modestly, especially for a gangster. He was rumored to buy his clothes at Kmart and wore really cheap shoes. He lived in a modest one-floor ranch house. The man had no flash. He was described as an old-school, real gangster. He was extremely careful in the way he conducted business as well. He would sometimes drive 40 or 50 miles out of the way just to use a payphone. He would pull over on the highway sometimes for an hour to avoid being followed. The FBI even admitted they never had anything substantial on Grasso. He was especially cruel to his own men, which traditionally doesn't breed loyalty. It was said he demanded 50% of everything they made. Grasso had little compassion for members of the underworld and was described as vicious and ruthless. It is noted that he treated civilians with respect, though. One of Grasso's legitimate enterprises was a restaurant called Franco's on Franklin Ave in New Haven's Little Italy. He was very particular about how he wanted his food prepared, and apparently if things were out of place in the restaurant or weren't operating up to his standards, he would erupt in anger. In 1984, Grasso's mentor and sponsor in the mob, Raymond Patriarca, died of a heart attack. This was the beginning of the end of the New England Mafia, and Raymond's decision about who would lead in his stead caused a rift in the family that would never be healed. Raymond chose his son Raymond Jr. to become boss after his death. His enemies called him Rubber Lips. Raymond Jr. was inexperienced and soft up to pretty much anyone's standards. He certainly wasn't cut from the same cloth as his father. Then 2 years later, Jerry and Julia would go to prison. Raymond Jr. promoted his father's loyal underling, Wild Guy Bill Grasso, to be his underboss. This enraged the Boston guys, who felt completely disrespected. Top Boston mafioso Larry Bayonne told Ray Jr. to promote East Boston capo J.R. Russo to consigliere upon Bayonne's near-future prison sentence, to try to smooth things over with the Boston guys. Russo was an old-school gangster who famously flew out to California and whacked Joe Barbosa while in the witness protection program. Russo was liked and well-respected by the younger, more hardcore mafia members in Boston like Vinny the Animal Ferrara. Grasso saw this as an opportunity to consolidate his power and basically make his move to control the whole family. Grasso was always resented by his contemporaries because of his close relationship with Raymond, and he definitely was not loved among his own crew after years of mistreatment. Now Grasso was even pissing off the Genovese family who controlled the city of Springfield, Mass. by trying to muscle in on the gambling rackets there. He also got into a beef with the Genovese capo over the vending machine turf in central Mass city of Worcester. Grasso at this point might have felt invincible, but he was in way over his head, and he was surrounding himself with enemies on all sides. Also with Frank Salemi out in prison, in the name of Ray Jr., he was making power moves in Boston, but really in his own self-interest. This was the last straw for Boston mafioso Russo and his faction. They hated Salemi, who they viewed as an upstart and not real mafia. Russo wanted the throne for himself, and his underlings thought he had earned the seat more than any of these other pretenders. Russo figured if he whacked Salemi and Grasso, the real power behind Ray Jr., he would show little resistance. On June 16, 1989, Russo's faction made their move. They invited Salemi to a peace talk at an IHOP on Route 1 in Saugus, Mass. As he walked towards the restaurant, a car sped towards him, and a would-be assassin shot at him, hitting him twice. Salemi ran to a nearby Papagino's and dove into a booth, pressing napkins on his wounds. He was bleeding profusely, but he would survive the attack. Wild Bill Grasso was not so lucky. 4 hours after Salemi was shot, Bill Grasso's body was found partially submerged in the Connecticut River in Wethersfield, Connecticut. The cause of death was a gunshot to the head. The symbolism of his body being dumped in the Connecticut River was that the Genovese family had been involved. The river was the border between their territories that Grasso kept encroaching on. It was said the Genovese captain he had the vending machine beef set him up under the guise of discussing their problem. His own crew members followed him to the meeting and promptly killed him. Most likely not having too much sentimental connection to Grasso after being bullied for years, I'm sure they probably happily volunteered. Wild Bill Grasso was a victim of his own greed and power of abuse. Apparently there are checks and balances in the underworld as well. Meanwhile, somewhere in Rhode Island, Raymond Jr. was cowering in a corner, peeing his pants and asking for an adult. This ended the life of another ruthless member of the Patriarcha Borgata. If you enjoyed this video, hit that old like button and leave me a comment. And subscribe. All the cool kids are doing it. Which reminds me to thank my new viewers and subscribers. I appreciate your support and feedback. Until next time, take care of yourself and have a great day.